There's loose powder, there's pressed powder, there's powder foundation, there's translucent powder, there's colored powder, there's matte powder, and there's luminous powder. How are you supposed to know how to apply all of these things? Well, lucky for you, I know, because I've dedicated the last 20 years of my life to it, and today I'm gonna explain it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Last week I did a whole video on the differences between loose powder and pressed powders, and I got a lot of comments in the comments section asking me to do an application style video showing you guys how to apply these products. So today you are in for a treat, because we're not only gonna talk about loose and pressed powder, we're gonna talk about powder foundation, we're gonna talk about tools, techniques, things you need to keep in mind when you're applying all of these products to create different looks, and who these kind of application techniques, tools, and products are best for. That sounds good to you? Then keep on watching. I want to get started by showing you guys the application of powder foundation, because there are so many questions on the channel about powder foundation. For someone that doesn't want to spend a lot of time on their makeup, they just want to look polished quickly, a powder foundation is an amazing option. They come in loose, like the Bare Minerals one, and they also come in pressed form, like the Laura Geller one, Jane Iredale. You can wear it completely on its own, quick and easy, buff it on, I'll show you that. But you can also wear it on top of liquid foundation for a coverage boost, so an addition of coverage, and I'll show you that as well. So on my right side, I'm going to show you the Bare Minerals, and then on my left side, I'm gonna show you Laura Geller. So when it comes to brushes, what you wanna keep in mind is the density of the bristles. Fluffy brushes like this with low bristle density are going to pick up less product and put down less product. So if you want a really natural finish, you're gonna wanna look for a brush that is not very dense. It's fluffy. When you push it down, it pushes down easily. So this is BK Beauty 103. This is a perfect brush for applying a wash of powder that isn't densely applied. Very, very natural. This is gonna lead to a really natural finish. So we'll start with our Bare Minerals. So what I like to do here is apply some of that loose powder to the cap, and then swirl my brush on. Now you can tap off the excess like this, so that you evenly distribute the powder amongst the bristles, so that when you go on, you don't get like a big blotchy result, right? Another thing that you can do is you can pick up a lot of powder, you can put it on the back of your hand and bounce it on the back of your hand. That's also gonna evenly distribute it. And then when it comes to the application, all you wanna do is work in circular motions like this. And that's gonna give you a really soft coverage. Now, because Laura Geller is pressed, it's gonna be easier. The powder's not gonna fly everywhere. You're not gonna have to try to even it out on the bristles. That's the benefit of pressed powder foundations over loose powder foundations. They are less messy. So what you wanna do is swirl, again, tap a little bit to distribute that pigment, and then you can just apply by buffing in circular motion. Now you can see that the coverage is super sheer because I used a really fluffy brush. So you almost can't even really tell that I put anything on. That's how sheer the coverage is when you're using a fluffy brush. If this isn't enough for you, this for sure isn't enough for me. I almost never reach for a fluffy brush when I'm doing a powder foundation because I like a lot more coverage than that. Now, this is what a Kabuki brush looks like. So the characteristics of a Kabuki brush are this. Normally we have a short handle, and the reason the handle is short is so that you get more control. You know, when you're writing with a pencil and you really need like precision in your writing, you move your hand down to the bottom of the pencil to write. Kabuki brushes are short because you get more control, as opposed to a long handle where you get a little bit more of like a soft blend. Something else to notice about it is that it is extremely dense. So these bristles are packed much more than these bristles. See, you can see that this is really soft. This is very, very, very packed. The bristle shape also comes two different ways when it comes to the Kabuki brush world. So you can get a flat top like this. This is gonna give you maximum coverage, but you can also get Kabuki brushes like this. This is BK Beauty 116. This has a long handle, but regardless of that, this is a Kabuki brush. Pretty much, okay? You have short bristles, super densely packed, but this one is rounded, whereas this one is flat. So for the sake of this video today, let's use this guy. This one is the Jane Iredale. They actually just launched a whole line of brushes, and this is a part of their newest collection launch, and it's a very, very nice brush. So I'll show you what happens when we intensify our coverage with the Kabuki. So again, here with our Bare Mineral. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm actually applying quite a bit of pressure on the skin, and I'm buffing in circular motions. Picking up more, tapping off excess, and buffing it in. The finish of Bare Minerals is really not matte. It has a bit of a luminescence to it that feels really natural and soft. So I don't want you guys to be so scared of powder foundations because you're imagining them like the old school powder foundations that are super dense and super matte. Some of them definitely are super dense and super matte. Like this one, Maybelline Superstay, is super dense and super matte, but you can get powder foundations that have more of a skin-like finish, and they may be a really good option for you if you are on the go and you want to even out your complexion in a quick and easy way. It just takes 2 minutes to buff this on the skin with a fluffy brush that will give a really soft focus finish, or with a Kabuki brush that's gonna give you a much more full coverage finish. So you can see what a difference that made by going in with a denser brush. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing with Laura Geller. If you wanna stick with your powder foundation, you don't wanna go in with concealer, you can spot correct any of the little spots. And when you are spot correcting, what you are doing is you are just stippling in that area. Again, with the Laura Geller, I have a pimple here that just will not go away. You can just pick up a little extra, apply, and then stipple. You can also go in and cover a little bit of your dark circles with it too. Are you gonna get like a super brightening effect like you would if you used a concealer? No, but you will still take the edge down from that dark circle. And a really nice thing about it is because it's powder, it's not going to be really creasy like a concealer gets, right? Concealing under the eyes can be such a challenge as we get older. This is an option as long as you have very hydrated under eyes to brighten without the drama of concealer. So as you can see, if you look straight at my face, the Bare Minerals actually has more of a luminous finish, whereas the Laura Geller has a little bit more of a mattifying finish. So the finish when it comes to powders makes a really big difference in how your overall skin looks. Some people like a matte finish more, and that's perfectly fine, but some people like more of a luminescent finish or a more radiant finish, and that's fine too. You just have to pick the powder that has the finish that you're looking for. Now, the third way to apply a powder foundation is with a sponge or a powder puff like this. A triangular powder puff is my favorite. These are gonna give you even more coverage. So say you're like, heck no, I don't want light coverage. This still isn't enough coverage. I want full glam coverage. That's when you're gonna reach for a powder puff or a sponge. And I will show you what happens when we do that. So when we use this, when we dip into our loose powder, we are gonna make sure that that powder, again, is really even. We don't want that to be blobby. So we're gonna have to press it again into the back of our hands to really even that out. And then we can go in and press. When you're using a powder puff, you don't wanna smear the powder everywhere. You wanna really press it into the skin and build the coverage up that way. That's a technique called stippling. And that's always the technique we use when we're building up coverage with anything, whether that's eyeshadow, whether that's concealer, whether that's powder foundation. You wanna build up coverage, you wanna push, 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 and stipple it in. For Laura Geller, I'm just gonna go in with my old school sponge. So there you have it. There is my right side done with the Bare Minerals Original and my left side done with the Laura Geller Baked Powder Foundation. As you can see, this has a more luminous, soft focus finish. This has a more mattifying finish. Regardless of the technique or the application tools that we use to apply it with, this is a very different finish than this. So you can choose which one you like according to your preferences. But keep in mind that the tools do matter, right? Whether you go fluffy, Kabuki, sponge, or powder puff, you're gonna get a bit of a different result. Light coverage, medium to full, full coverage. Let's take this off and start again. The second way you can use powder foundation is on top of liquid foundation, and it's for an extra coverage boost. So today I'm gonna use L'Oreal True Match Nude Liquid Foundation. This is a really nice light to medium coverage foundation with a beautiful finish. And then on my right, I'm gonna use the Jane Iredale powder foundation on top of it to give it more coverage. This is an extremely good quality, beautiful powder foundation that looks amazing on all skin types and ages. And then on the other side, I'm gonna use a really budget-friendly option, which is the Maybelline Superstay. This one is very full coverage, I would say, and it's bulletproof. Scott Barnes uses it a lot. JLo's makeup artist, I learned about it from him. He uses it all the time on his celebrity clients. And it really is a kind of a phenomenal product, but it's dense and it's heavy and it's extreme. So if you're a natural girl, I would stay away from this one and look into the other ones that I showed in this video. So let's go in with the Jane Iredale with its Kabuki brush. So when I go over my liquid foundation with a powder foundation, the first pass I like to do in pressing motions or stippling motions, because I have to set it and make the finish feel more powdery before I can buff, or else my bristles will buff away the liquid. So I just go in and I push, 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 press, press, press. And then when I have a finish that feels more silky and less sticky, that's when I can go in and I can buff. So just by doing that, you can really see how much more coverage I now have on this side versus this side. This side has a more luminous finish because the Jane Iredale powder isn't luminous, right? If I wanted to do a more luminous, more full coverage finish, I could also go in with the Bare Minerals one, which has a more luminous finish, right? But you can see that overall, I just got a lot more coverage. It looks more flawless on this side than on this side. If you really want to do it all the way, full on glam, then you can do the Maybelline Superstay and you can go in with your powder puff instead. Now that's going to give you much, much, much fuller coverage because the powder puff is fuller coverage than the Kabuki brush, and this powder is fuller coverage than the Jane Iredale. You can see in real time here how as I am doing this, my face is turning into like an Instagram filter. Now, does that mean that everyone is gonna wanna run to the store and buy this and buy a powder puff and do their makeup this way? Not at all, because what works for some people doesn't work for other people. I have really oily skin, so my skin wears powders well. My skin loves powders. My skin does not like glowy products. It's too much glow, it's too much oil. But if you have dry skin, going in with this really hardcore Maybelline powder and a puff might be way too much. So if you have drier skin, I definitely suggest going in with powders using a lighter application technique, like a really fluffy brush. It's all about combining the right product with the right application technique that's gonna get you the finish that you want. Now here you can see the difference between the Jane Iredale powder on top of liquid foundation and the Maybelline Superstay powder also on top of the same liquid foundation. The Jane Iredale was applied with the Kabuki brush, the Maybelline Superstay was applied with a powder puff. Before we move on to loose powders, I just wanna let you guys know that if you are using powders a lot, powder foundations in particular, one way to have the powder foundation look more like a liquid foundation if you don't like a powdery or a dry finish is to actually go in with a setting spray. A setting spray will basically melt the powders into the skin and make it become one with the skin. So it just kind of seamlessly blends in. Now you can use beauty elixirs like Caudalie Beauty Elixir, or you can actually go in with an actual setting spray like Urban Decay All Nighter is one that I reach for. It's one of my favorites. Charlotte Tilbury also has one that's excellent, but I'll just show you right now, even the Caudalie Beauty Elixir. After I spray that in, all of those powder products are going to kind of melt into the skin and look a lot more skin-like. This is how both sides look after using a setting spray. All right, I'm gonna wash this off. Let's start again. Alrighty, so off camera, I put on the Giorgio Armani Luminous Silk Foundation. I also used concealer this time, my Tinty Doll concealer. And I did that because I want to move into loose powders now. And we usually use loose powders after we do our foundation and our concealers. They're not typically used alone, although they can definitely be used alone to mattify and to pore blur. They can also be used under foundation to control shine. Okay, there are so many ways to use powders. They are such a staple for a makeup artist, but let's just simplify it a little bit. So loose powders can come in translucent forms where it looks white, but it's actually clear and invisible. This is the Chanel one, very finely milled, very nice. But it can also come in colored form, like this one from Marcel. So you can see this is translucent, this is colored. I personally like to use translucent powders more than colored powders, especially in loose form. And that's because I usually use my loose powders to set my makeup, to brighten, to stop things from creasing, and to pore blur. And I find it a little bit easier to work with a powder that doesn't have color, that won't alter my foundation shade, than to work with a powder that does have color, because it will alter the foundation shade. Now, some people love using colored powders because it allows them to contour, it allows them to highlight if they use a lighter one. It allows them even to bronze in their face with it. So there are many reasons why these come in handy, but for the most part, when you're setting, a translucent one is kind of foolproof. It's a little bit easier. One way to go ahead and apply translucent powder is to apply it very sparingly for a very natural finish. So I'm gonna pick up a little bit on a smaller brush because I have more control if I use a smaller brush. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna only powder my T-zone, which is my nose, the center of my forehead. In here, I always get oily. My nasolabial fold where I crease, and my chin where I get shiny. Now, when it comes to under the eyes, I'm gonna stipple away any of the creasing that may have settled in the last minute after I apply the concealer. I'm gonna swirl into my cap. I'm gonna tap off the excess, and then again, I'm gonna press it in. And that should stop it from creasing. And you're done. That's the most natural, easiest way to apply a setting powder that is translucent and loose. Now, if you're the type of person that has oilier skin and you want more oil control throughout the day, don't just do this. It's not gonna be enough for you, okay? You need to kind of pack that powder really into the skin so that it's there and ready to pick up that oil when the oil comes out. So for that, you're gonna wanna use your triangular powder puff, right? The theories are all the same amongst the different types of powders. You just have to adopt it to what you're doing. So again, I'm gonna pick it up on the cap, and then I'm gonna put it on the back of my hand to really evenly distribute that pigment. And I'm gonna push the powder into the areas that I want to mattify. Now, because I am getting older, I don't typically do this as much under the eyes as I used to. I used to really go in and like really pack. I find now using a translucent powder under my eyes with a puff like this, it just becomes too dry over time. Usually what I do as an oily skin person is I will press in my oily zones with a powder puff, and I'll use this brush, N14, and I will dab under my eyes to set. And I find that's kind of a good combination for me to not get as much creasing under the eyes and get more oil control in the center of the face. So the third way to use translucent powder is to do something called baking. This was very, very popular a few years ago. I feel like it's dying out lately because it looks amazing on camera and it looks amazing on stage. It looks amazing at a gala, but it's not really great for day to day because it can really dry out your skin. It can look very dry and unflattering in person up close. I'm gonna show it to you guys anyways. What you wanna do when you are baking is use a damp beauty blender. So you wanna run this through water, opening and closing it until it becomes really fluffy, it doubles in size, it becomes really soft. Now you're gonna pick up a bunch of translucent powder and you're going to apply it here at the center of the face. So baking originated in the drag community actually, and its roots are based in theater makeup. The reason that drag queens bake is twofold. For one, the theater lights are very intense. And because they're so intense, they needed something that would set the makeup so that the makeup wouldn't move at all. Another reason is that when you do this from far away, it really will like snatch your face. It will brighten the center of the face a lot. It will lift certain areas. It's a highlight and contour technique taken to the extreme, and it looks incredibly impressive on camera and it looks amazing on stage. So the reason it kind of got into mainstream society is because celebrity makeup artists started baking their celebrity clients. So Mario was one of the first ones to do this on Kim Kardashian, right? Makeup by Mario on Kim Kardashian. She would talk about it on social media, and then all of the other influencers got on this train. They started doing it on social media and it became this big trend. Since then, it's faded in popularity. And the reason is because it is so drying for certain skin types, for dry skin, for more mature skin, for people with fine lines and wrinkles around the eyes. It really can emphasize it a lot. If you have flawless skin, if you're very young, you don't have any wrinkles, it can be amazing, especially looks amazing on camera and on stage, like I said. But in day-to-day practice, it's really not that popular anymore. So if you try it and it doesn't work for you, don't think you're doing something wrong. It doesn't work for most people in real life. But yeah, when you bake, you want to leave it on for about 5 minutes or so, really let it set, and then you can just swipe it away. Now, I didn't do any contour or any bronzer or any of the things, so it looks kind of basic, but you get the idea behind the techniques of baking. Now let's talk about luminous loose powders, okay? Because these aren't talked about enough, and I think people get confused by them. There's a few different ways that you can use these luminous powders. If you have dry skin and you moisturize really well, you can use this as like a veil on your skin to make your skin look luminous and beautiful. But it can also be used as a highlighter on key areas like the forehead and the cheekbones, and I will show you that. So again, you're gonna pick it up with a smaller brush. This is Refer number 19. You're gonna swirl it on its cap. You're gonna tap off the excess, and then you can apply a little bit here in the center. Do you see how I just got a little spot of light there? And then you can apply it here on the cheekbone. Some people even like applying it to the center of the nose to give a little spot of light there as well. Another way that you can apply this is with one of those non-dense brushes, right? So BK103 fluffy brush. You can pick up a little bit of this powder. You can swirl it on its cap, tap off the excess, and you can sweep it across the entire face. And this can be done on top of your foundation for that added luminosity and glow. So if you look at this side of my face with the luminous sweet powder versus this side of my face with the mattifying powder by Chanel, there really is a big difference between matte, more pore blurring. You can see more pores, but it's more luminous. If you want best of both worlds, which is what I want, you can actually use this more as like a highlighter on top of a mattifying powder. So in this case, let's use Huda Beauty. Okay, this is Huda Beauty. This powder is amazing. You can take your Huda Beauty and you can mattify, because Huda Beauty is mattifying, the areas where you don't want shine, which is usually here because pores can be quite large here, and here because you don't want attention brought to the nasolabial fold, right? And maybe a little bit under the eyes, but with a fluffier brush so you don't end up too drying. So once you've got that mattified and blurred out, you can then take a powder like this as like a finishing powder and apply it in strategic places on top of your mattifying primer. So you can take this brush again and add it here, and here. And there you go. And that brings me to, last but not least, pressed powders that are not powder foundation hybrids. Okay, so these have a lighter consistency. They don't work like foundations. They're just pressed powders. So you can get one like this, which is Rimmel Instant Fix and Matte, which is translucent. This one really is just to mattify shine throughout the day. But you can also get some like this one from Floresis, which has color, comes with the powder puff, has color. beautiful little compact. Now, the benefit of this is obviously that it's great for midday touch-ups, and that's what I recommend you guys using it for. So you can pop this in your bag and you can touch up throughout the day when you start looking shiny. The benefit of having a translucent one is that you can get rid of the shine without making your makeup look cakey, without having it build up too much. In this case, what I like doing the most is having my powder puff from Amazon, my translucent powder, and popping it in my bag. When I'm looking very shiny, I grab some of that translucent powder. I usually blend it on my hand a little bit, and then I push into areas that are shiny. I never rub because that just smears everything around, makes a huge mess. I always push. If you prefer a pressed powder that is colored, you will get more coverage, but you might risk getting a little bit cakey. But again, I would use the same application technique of grabbing a little powder puff, blending it on your hand, and pushing. You are going to get a little bit of that coverage, a little bit of color, but you're also going to mattify shine as long as the formula is matte and not shiny, but I feel like most pressed powder formulas are matte. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope that you found that helpful. If you have anything else that you want to learn how to do, then definitely leave it in the comment section below because your idea could definitely be featured in my next how-to video. This video is over.